You open the thing you said mattered. The document, the email, the application, the project file, the message you really need to send. And for a few seconds, you look at it. Then something happens. Your brain suddenly remembers that the desk is messy, or that you should check one small notification, or that you need coffee, or that before you start, you should probably find the perfect song, the perfect plan, the perfect mood. And somehow, 20 minutes later, the important thing is still sitting there, untouched. People usually call this laziness. They say you lack discipline. You are not serious enough. You do not want it badly enough. But that explanation has a problem. Because when you procrastinate, you are not always doing nothing. Sometimes you are doing everything except the one thing that matters. You answer old messages. You clean a drawer. You organize files that did not need organizing. You research tools. You rewrite the plan. You become strangely productive in every direction except the direction that counts. So maybe the problem is not that your brain hates effort. Maybe the problem is that this specific effort feels emotionally expensive. And that is where procrastination becomes more interesting. Because in many cases, you are not avoiding the task. You are avoiding the feeling attached to the task. That feeling might be boredom, confusion, uncertainty, pressure, the fear of doing it badly, the fear of finding out you are not as ready as you hoped, or the quiet shame of already being late. The task is on the screen, but the emotional cost is what your brain reacts to. And your brain is very good at finding exits. This video is not about turning procrastination into a personality flaw, and it is not about pretending every delay has one simple cause. It is about a strange human pattern. The more a task matters, the more threatening it can feel to start. And once you see why, procrastination stops looking like pure irrationality. It starts looking like an old shortcut that works too well in the wrong environment. Here's the part people miss. Your brain is not only trying to make good long-term decisions. A lot of the time, it is trying to change how you feel right now. That is not a bug. It is one of the most basic jobs of a mind inside a body. If something feels unpleasant, the brain looks for relief. If something feels uncertain, it looks for clarity. If something feels threatening, it looks for safety. And an important task can create all three at once. A blank document is not dangerous, not literally, but it can carry the possibility of failure. A difficult email is not a predator, but it can carry the possibility of rejection, conflict, or embarrassment. A project you care about is not attacking you, but it can quietly ask a terrifying question. What if I try and it still is not good enough? That is why just start can sound simple from the outside and feel impossible from the inside. From the outside, it looks like a task. From the inside, it can feel like a test of intelligence, a test of talent, a test of discipline, a test of whether you are the kind of person you keep hoping you are. And when a task becomes a test of the self, avoidance starts to make emotional sense. Not logical sense, emotional sense. Researchers have described procrastination as a form of self-regulation failure, but not just in the obvious bad time management way. One influential view is that procrastination often gives priority to short-term mood repair. In plain English, that means this: you delay the future problem because avoiding it gives you relief now. And relief is powerful. The moment you close the document, open the phone, or switch to an easier task, the pressure drops just a little. Your body learns that. The next time the same task appears,
Your brain remembers the escape route, not because the escape solved the problem, because it solved the feeling. For a moment, the task disappeared. The discomfort dropped. The room became easier to exist in. That tiny reward can train the loop. Cue, important task. Feeling, discomfort. Action, avoid. Reward, relief. Then later comes the cost. The deadline gets closer. The email becomes more awkward. The project becomes heavier. Your future self receives the bill. And when the bill arrives, something cruel happens. The shame from delaying makes the task feel even worse. So now the task is not only difficult, it is difficult plus late, difficult plus guilt, difficult plus the story that you are the kind of person who always does this. That is how procrastination becomes a loop. Avoidance creates relief. Relief reinforces avoidance. Consequences create shame. Shame makes the task more aversive, and the more aversive the task becomes, the more attractive avoidance feels. This is why judging procrastination as simple laziness can make the problem harder to understand.
Laziness suggests you do not care, but often the opposite is closer to the truth. Sometimes you procrastinate because you care too much about what the task might mean. A small assignment is just an assignment, but a project that could change your life is not just a project. A message to a friend is not just a message if the relationship feels fragile. A portfolio is not just a portfolio if it might prove whether you are good enough. A job application is not just a form if it carries the possibility of rejection. The bigger the meaning, the bigger the emotional shadow. And the brain does not always separate the practical task from the symbolic threat. It just feels the shadow and moves away. That sounds irrational, but it may not have started that way. One way to understand this is through an old protective logic. Living organisms are built to avoid pain, uncertainty, and threat. If something in the environment feels unsafe, hesitation can be useful. Moving away can be useful. Saving energy can be useful. Avoiding a costly mistake can be useful. In an older world, immediate discomfort often pointed to immediate problems. A dangerous sound, a hostile face, a risky climb, a food that looked wrong, a social mistake that could damage belonging. Paying attention to unpleasant feelings was not stupidity, it was information. The problem is that modern life is full of symbolic threats that feel urgent, but are not solved by avoidance. A spreadsheet can feel like danger. An unread message can feel like danger. A blank page can feel like danger. A public post can feel like danger. A deadline can feel like danger. Not because your brain is broken, because the brain often treats emotional discomfort as a signal to escape, even when the correct move is to stay close and do the thing slowly. This is where the old shortcut starts causing modern problems. Modern work is weird. A lot of important tasks no longer have clear beginnings or clear endings. They are abstract, open-ended, evaluated later, judged by invisible people, connected to money, status, identity, and future possibility. And the reward is often far away. You do the boring work today so that some future version of you might benefit later. But the relief from avoiding it is immediate. That creates a brutally unfair competition. Future progress is quiet. Present relief is loud. Future self says, "Please do this now." Present self says, "Please make this feeling stop." And present self is the one holding the mouse. This does not mean procrastination is always fear. Sometimes the task is boring.
Sometimes it is unclear. Sometimes you are tired. Sometimes the environment is designed to distract you. Sometimes the task is too large, too vague, or too disconnected from any visible reward. But in many cases, the same pattern appears. The brain chooses a smaller emotional discomfort now, even if it creates a bigger practical cost later. And the modern world offers endless exits. If you do not want to feel the task, you can open a feed. If you do not want to face the blank page, you can research productivity systems. If you do not want to send the message, you can reread it 30 times. If you do not want to begin, you can prepare to begin. Preparation is one of procrastination's favorite disguises. It feels responsible. It looks productive. It gives you the emotional reward of moving near the task without the risk of actually touching it. You are not avoiding the mountain. You are arranging the backpack. Again. And that is what makes the pattern so slippery. Procrastination often hides inside reasonable behavior. Planning is useful. Rest is useful. Research is useful. Waiting can be wise. The question is not, am I doing something productive? The question is this action bringing me closer to the task or protecting me from the feeling of starting? That difference matters, because the feeling of starting is often the real wall, not the whole task, just the first contact, the first sentence, the first ugly draft, the first awkward email, the first 5 minutes where your brain has to admit, I do not know exactly how this will go. Humans hate that moment. We like completed identities. We like clean stories. We like imagining ourselves as capable people. Starting a task threatens the fantasy version of competence because reality enters the room. The idea in your head is perfect. The first draft is not. The plan is elegant. The first attempt is messy. The future self is impressive. The present self is sitting there, confused, hungry, and checking the same app again. This gap can feel humiliating. So the brain protects the fantasy by postponing the evidence. If you never start, you never have to see the imperfect first version. If you never send it, you never have to get the response.
If you never try, you can keep the comforting possibility that maybe you would have done well.